Okay, so I'm gonna be working on some far-flung stuff this week, and I've had this for like upwards to a year now, and I haven't built it. Now, my cat's gotten into it, but it is one of these kind of craft carts. It's a 5-drawer rolling cart, and I thought I'd build it this week and start working on some of the more tactile paper stuff. Hi, Queenie. And then I could put this in almost like my organizational track. So I think that's what we're gonna do today. Yeah, and then maybe I'll start working on some stuff. If you stay around my channel for long enough, you will soon learn that when I play TTRPGs, I really like roleplay. Obviously, roleplay isn't necessarily for everyone, but when I come and sit down at a table, I know that that is something I'm going to partake in quite heavily. It comes with being a theater kid, but I'm also a graduated theater kid as well. Like, I have my degree in 2 sets of that, so it's kind of second nature for me to come into a D&D experience and want to portray my character as best that I can. And when I switched over to a DMing role really early on in my D&D life, I put a lot of stock into being a roleplay game runner. And I really like it. I think it allows me to portray a wide variety of characters that I wouldn't get the opportunity to do if I was on stage or in front of a camera. It allows me to think about different experiences and have more of a hand in it. However, we've been playing a wide variety of games. I've started to play Vampire the Masquerade in the last year. It's a fun system where you portray a creature of the night with all their cool powers and abilities. And instead of it being a very like 50-50 like roleplay combat game, it's like 90-10 on combat. It's very politically driven. You are made to have aspirations that might interfere with other creatures of the night that come through. And with that means that there is a lot of role play. And when you have so much on the table, it is hard to determine what is necessary. For example, I've been running Vampire for about a year now as a storyteller, and my players want to get into the deep dramatics of it. And that's super cool because it's necessary. The game is super messy in how players balance their ambitions and desires with that of their group members, and they're all often at like this kind of shifting opposing sides of what is necessary. They could all come together for one common goal, but the reason for coming together is all very different. In a way, it's shown me that this story can be in the hands of the player a lot more than a D&D campaign is. Because the vampires are so powerful in it themselves, anything on a human that is unprepared, they just succeed on, and it's very likely that they can overpower other vampires depending on how they stack themselves up against these other people. And so it lets them drive the plot forward. And I found out that I need to be more of a referee in terms of almost like a director, knowing when to cut off a scene because it's reached its peak and it doesn't need to continue anymore. Games sometimes become circular. Things come back around. Arguments come back and never resolve in a way that can sometimes feel frustrating because there's no resolution that, whether good or bad, just nothing is resolved. So we keep coming back. This isn't an all-the-time problem, but it does happen. So we have to strike this balance of too much roleplay can kind of suck. It can get frustrating and annoying to rehash and repeat things that we've already seen and done before. But not enough roleplay also sucks if you don't have enough time to build up this process, then how do we tell a fulfilling story as well? And this could be just not even just for Vampire or World of Darkness games. This could be for any role-playing game. I can definitely see where it would fit and apply in D&D. I had a campaign where sometimes players would rehash the same arguments or the same feelings without elevating it to be a new conversation. It ended up taking up some of the time at the table that we could have been used for other roleplay or progression in some capacity. So what do we do with this? Like, how do we go forward? Well, when I was preparing for Vampire the Masquerade, when I was looking into playing it and running it, I found the perfect resource, which was LA by Night. The old company Geek and Sundry put on a live actual play show called LA by Night, ran by Jason Carl. Jason Carl is an incredible storyteller for Vampire the Masquerade and is on the team for Vampire the Masquerade. In this series, in it, he runs B. Day Walters, Cynthia Marie, Eric Ishii, and Alexander Ward as a 4-vampire coterie and go about a night in LA with their own ambitions and desires, driving most of the story. I won't spoil too much of what the show entails, but at one point in a season, Jason announces a Vignette Night. It is a night dedicated to breaking up characters into single solo sessions and running either sometimes with guests as other characters or just one-on-one different epilogue scenes from the season. And they kind of build up a big episode of about 15 to 20 minutes of what these characters are doing. Sometimes it's used to resolve smaller story beats that they did not get to in the other episodes, and sometimes it is to expand upon ideas that we heard about or were implied throughout the run of the show. They did this for about a couple seasons, and later on, when they started their next campaign, New York by Night, they used the same process again, which often allowed players to go after ambitions and desires that the coterie as a whole might not go after. It let them do things mechanically that both elevated the story, progressed their characters, and felt really good. Oftentimes, I felt like the things that were involved progressed or capstoned a lot of what we were talking about in that episode, or even the season or the character arc as a whole. When I started to run Vampire the Masquerade, I employed a few of these throughout my first year of this, and I felt that it came off with really good effect. Everyone had something they would have in mind, and then oftentimes when people saw what was happening, they would want to roleplay, and it created more scenes that we could go to for the rest of the campaign. New interests were found out, new feelings between coterie members were explored, and we got a chance to not worry about the plot driving forward and running them down, but instead one night in game was centered on grounding the characters back into their own realities and figuring out where to go next. And I think about this sometimes in D&D, because what group hasn't wanted a beach day for their game? That classic anime moment where the plot isn't coming up over the hill and coming to attack, but they get to have their at dawn we plan moment, or get to have the, oh great, the boss is dead, what do we do next moment. Downtime is important, and roleplay can be a very good source of that. It can go often hand in hand together. And it wasn't until recently that my DM for one of the games I'm in, a Ghibli campaign, decided that he was going to do a Vignette Night, that I realized that the art of a good D&D Vignette Night is awesome. It is effectively the most useful tool in a DM repertoire that I think not a lot of people know about right now. So I'm going to talk about that today. Today we are going to discuss the art of a good D&D Vignette Night and how you can run it. So let's get started.
Okay, so
part of this setup is I'm giving everyone paper props, and I was starting to realize that one, it just didn't matter if I typed it up and printed it. It was just gonna be like kind of too much. But I thought the vibe of the character might fit if it was like a little scroll. So I have my other paper here. I found one that looked a little bit like the vibe that I wanted to go for. I'm gonna write down my note on this I cut out. And I have a piece of like faux leather that I'm gonna like turn into like the band for a little scroll. And I think that might work a lot better. I can't show you what I write down, but I'll show you the finished product in a second. And here it is. I'm actually quite happy with the way that this turned out. It's really cute. I'm wondering if I'm gonna have to like seal it a bit more, maybe hot glue it, but I want this to be able to be like taken off, but I'm not sure yet. And I think the longer that it stays curled up, I think the longer it'll kind of crimp itself, which will be good for the game later on. As a DM, when you go to run a Vignette Night, you need to be aware that it is a night to allow all the roleplay to come to a head in a structured way. The only time that you should ever think about the plot coming forward is if the player does something to push it forward. But you have to keep in mind that it is never in a way that ends the night now or stops the other players from role-playing in any capacity. If someone does something like to that degree, that should be the end of your episode, but only after everything has been done. With that being said, you have to pick your Vignette Night when there is not a ticking time clock in your game, or there's no threat to your party missing out or losing something. And this is definitely not the time to have the party staring down an army to suddenly stop and talk about what happened 17 sessions ago. This is effectively an Anime Beach Day episode where nothing is going to continue unless the players are going to do the pushing. So I've printed off the one thing I needed, and now I'm gonna do the other two, and I have different papers for this one. I have this kind of parchment-y thing, and I've got this like very nice red one that I'm gonna use. I'm gonna put them in the order of the printer. Step one is to announce it in advance. I try to do this about maybe a week in advance, depending on how often we're playing. If it's every 2 weeks, then I pretty much announce it right away. This is just basically to have everyone know that this is what is going to be next session. Nothing is going to progress, nothing is going to happen, no plot is going to happen, so they just know that they are safe to do what they want. Know that it is downtime. I try to tell them that it's not like about making money, or it's not about those typical like D&D downtime activities. But if they want to have that as part of their scene, I don't see why not. I would tend to let mechanics drop at this point. If they want to make some money by, you know, going up with their friend and making money at a monastery by doing chores, then have them have a scene during that. But I would just give them the money at that point, or conclude those smaller things with that as the reward. Players can tell you exactly what they want. They want a scene with a fellow player or the full party, or little moments before bed or something like that. This gets them thinking if they actually have anything that they want to do, and you can encourage them to think about those little things. Oh, you said a couple sessions ago that you wanted to try your hand at learning how to make potions from your other party member, Gary. You can do that tonight, and that could be part of your moment. Perhaps you wanted to have a library day with another party member so you guys could look for clues on a riddle that you guys got a couple sessions ago. Well, there is a library in town. The point of this is to encourage your party to do so that they have the opportunity to have those roleplay moments. Having them send it to you means that you can loosely kind of get an idea of what everyone's vibe is and how they want to settle the night. Sometimes you might have a session that is kind of silly in their vignettes. They just want to have that decompression time, and that's totally normal. If they don't want to kind of go for what is next in the main plot, that's totally fine. It is their time to do whatever. If they want to have the romantic plot night, that's amazing. If they want to work out what is next in their backstory, that's awesome. Sometimes people just also want to have a costume change or go and relax and gamble with their party mates. Sometimes they want to get serious and talk about like how one character tried to sacrifice themselves so the others could escape, and it wasn't necessary, but that opened up new feelings. It's free game, effectively. So, two things I want to do are, I've got calligraphy pens. I'm not good at it, but I always like to say it just for my peace of mind that there is something on the envelopes with this kind of thing. Step 2 is after they have sent you everything that they want to do, loosely structure your night. How I do this is kind of dividing it between sections of the game. If I know that multiple characters want to intersect and talk to each other, but they say that they want to be alone, I'll break up the scenes by making sure that nobody knows they can interact. If Gary and Sally want to have a private conversation, and I also know Bob wants to have a conversation with Sally, I don't necessarily want those to overlap because it might not be private. Bob might get the idea that he can barrel in and be a part of the conversation. So I'll separate Gary and Sally's conversation with two different party members having a scene, and then come back to Bob and Sally so that they both have their one-on-one times with their characters, and nothing gets blown out or separated or mangled because everybody's kind of jumping the gun and getting excited. While you're doing this, I'd also suggest allowing room for further improv or added scenes. Sometimes things come up in these nights that gets the mind jumping. They have that light bulb moment. They're like, oh yeah, I forgot about the ancient book that's been in the bag of holding for sessions. We should pull that out and search that. So they can send you a message in the moment and be like, hey, can I look at this when I get a chance? And you just add it to the queue effectively. It also means that more players might come to you intermittently with that, and you'll have to do that on the fly. But honestly, I find that it's not that big of a deal. You just gotta make sure that you remember to do that. I don't think I've had a moment where I've called for a vignette night, had everyone send me stuff, and there wasn't an added scene. It's kind of like a rock rolling down a hill. It's really hard to stop the role play once it starts, and so people tend to want to just keep going. So even if you feel like when you call for this in advance and you get like maybe one or two things from people, they tend to add on very quickly after. The final step is at the end of the session, you have the players plan their next steps. This is kind of like the DM's scene, effectively. I like to capstone the end of our session with all the roleplay being done, asking the question, what is next for you? Can you tell me what is going to happen next session? If that means travel, if that means acting on information that they have found so far, then that's all good. As long as I get an answer, I feel like that is a good way to end the session. Everyone got their chance to roleplay and get those big emotions out, and then you get to know what is happening. A good D&D vignette night tends to be like a hard reset for a lot of players at my table. It lets them experience the dramatic conclusions of different outcomes from the sessions in one easier to feel space. You also get to add into the dramatic elements as players recontextualize their relationships with their fellow players, and sometimes relationships become soured or become stronger and better than ever. It gives you, the DM, a chance to have a week off for extra planning, and you know what everyone's plan is for the future sessions after this one. And finally, everyone can dive into their characters' drives, passions, connections, and relationships, and be renewed to continue their journey with more to work with later on. Roleplay should never be a detriment to your table if your table is interested. It helps add more narrative weight to the story. It allows the players to feel like they are a part of a narrative that is progressing because of them. And it oftentimes creates a lot of fun, silly, deep, intense memories that I keep thinking about as if they are real things that I lived. Because in a way, they are things that we have lived. We have created this story together. I think a lot of people get attached to stories because they feel emotional, they feel relevant to us as a whole. And having a dedicated space at your gaming table to show that you enjoy that and like that as an added benefit to your world or your games as a whole is another way to continue to add more richness to the world around you. I'm going to continue to probably use vignettes for a long time. I really like the way that they have elevated how my group can handle and experience how their characters work. And I don't know, it's been always a lot of fun to see what characters want to talk about. And it's almost like a little dive in to see how they're feeling about the world around them, about the game that you guys are creating together as a whole. I think that's it for me this week. I hope you enjoyed this little sneak peek into something I do as a DM. Can you let me know down below if you guys have ever experienced a Vignette Night? Do you like the D&D Beach Day episode, or do you like it to be kind of consistent with the progression of the plot? Thanks again for watching. I don't know what the next video is going to be just yet, but I have some ideas in mind, so if you could subscribe and hit the little bell if you liked this video, that'd be great. That's it for me. I will see you guys in the next video. Like, comment, subscribe, and the end.